Assalamu alaikum. This is the story of why I converted to Islam. I converted to Islam March of 2024 on the first day of Ramadan. But the reasons why I converted to Islam are many and varied, and I believe they really start decades beforehand on 9/11, actually. On 9/11, I was in college and I was dating a guy who was going to Harvard and was very impressive to my friends and family, as you might imagine. And he seemed to be overall a pretty stand-up guy. But on the day of 9/11, he and I talked, and he said something so horrifically Islamophobic that I broke up with him on the spot. Islamophobia, which became rampant in the days and months and years after 9/11, was deeply irritating to me on a soul level. I'm not exactly sure why, but in retrospect, I wonder if there was some part of me that just knew. I found myself gravitating towards Muslim people on campus and becoming friends with many of them. Some of these friendships I have sustained in the years since, and their influence over me was pretty strong in terms of how I perceived Islam. Their example was a very good one, and so I never developed the prejudice and biases against Islam that many people in the West do, alhamdulillah, so I did not have that to work through, thankfully. But I was raised Christian, and I did leave the Christian church when I was 19, and I embarked on 24 years of atheism. I would have also described myself as an agnostic. Perhaps that is more accurate, because I was always very spiritually attuned and felt that there was something, maybe not God or the concept of God that I had been raised with, but there was something I felt, which was difficult to reconcile with what I consider more broadly to be not atheism, but kind of an anti-theism. Religion never felt like a safe place for me. It felt like a place of really intense, enforced conformity to the detriment often of people's individual sense of worth and belonging. And that just wasn't for me. But again, I felt that there was something. So fast forward to 2021, the years leading up to my conversion. So from about the end of 2021 to the end of 2023, I went through a series of crises, just absolutely traumatizing events, starting with the unexpected and extremely gruesome death of my brother, followed shortly by my best friend from college losing her fight with cancer. She was one of the best people I had ever known in my entire life. Somewhere in there, my husband was also diagnosed with MS, and his health began to deteriorate rapidly. And there were a bunch of other things that I'm not going to get into that were extremely difficult and put me into a state of deep mourning and deep grief. I felt sort of abandoned by the God that I supposedly didn't believe in. And yet at the same time, I found myself praying, reaching for God, seeking God in desperation, just anything to ground me, to provide some sense of meaning, some sense of security, to make everything that had happened to me make sense. I sought out various healing modalities, various belief systems, everything from paganism and tarot and astrology to Christianity again and Judaism. And, despite the fact that I had never developed any sort of Islamophobic biases, Islam was the last place I thought to look. Now, in this desperation, while I'm, reaching out towards and seeking God and finding myself praying, I remember thinking this is what people do, right? In moments of desperation, in moments of, being plunged into absolute darkness, people turn to God. suddenly. And it felt almost blasphemous to me. I didn't love that, because I thought, I've never reached towards God in the ordinary moments or the blessed moments, only now. It felt morally inconsistent to me. And so, I wanted to seek that sort of moral consistency, maybe a, more consistent or continuous belief system regardless of what I was going through. But again, Islam was the last place I thought to look. And then October 7th rolled around, October 7th of 2023. And I started to witness the Palestinians undergoing the worst atrocities imaginable. And yet, unlike me, who felt abandoned by God, or whatever you might call God, the Palestinians didn't seem to feel that way. They never asked, "Where is God? Where are you?" They thanked God. Even in the midst of unimaginable suffering, they thanked God. And I thought, this is new. This is different. This is a very different form of grief. This is a resilient form of grief that I am not familiar with. Nothing in my sort of like Western upbringing has exposed me to this kind of grieving. And, I'm used to, again, coming from a, Western, socialization. I'm used to the idea of like good and bad being very separate buckets. We often think that, good follows bad, like the rainbow after the storm, but not that they like coexist or are simultaneous. That's really not a part of our conceptualization. But okay, this Palestinian form of grief, this resilient form of grief, I really wanted to investigate it further. And I thought the source of this must be in the Quran. So I ordered a copy of the Quran and I started reading. So this was at the end of 2023. The beginning of 2023, I decided I'm going to try some manifestation. I'm going to try some law of attraction, and I'm going to choose a word of the year that I hope describes my year, that I hope becomes the theme of my year. So I chose the word ease because that's what I most desperately needed. And then I thought, well, God or the universe or whomever, they've got jokes because 2023 ended up being the hardest year of my life. So I ordered ease, and all I got was hardship. Then I'm reading the Quran at the end of 2023, and I come across the verse, "Truly, with hardship, there is ease." And I thought, there it is. There's my word of the year. It was the first time I had seen my word of the year all year. I hadn't seen it anywhere. I hadn't heard it spoken anywhere, but there it was in the Quran. And I was really struck by it. And I was really struck by this idea, with hardship, there is ease. So I reached out to some Muslim friends and I was like, what is this saying? Does this say like, ease follows hardship? They're subsequent? Or do they coexist somehow? And I would hear back, they coexist. What does that mean? What is that, And then I started to notice that in the Quran conflates good and bad constantly. It's as if there is no polarity. It's as if like a contradiction between the two is an illusion. And then I started to get it. It was like, okay, yes, what seems bad could in fact be for our highest good. What seems good can in fact turn sour. We don't know. We cannot perceive ultimately the outcomes of these things. Wealth can be a calamity. Poverty can be a blessing, for example. So alhamdulillah for everything. So this is what I was starting to learn from Islam. And this, in fact, did imbue a sense of resilience within me and in terms of the grief I was experiencing. So I took the final step and took my Shahada. And here we are. That's why I became Muslim.